A CIA veteran and a man who oversaw the capture of Al-Qaeda's third-in-command is facing nearly 3 years in jail. This during sentencing later today for leaking classified intelligence. John Kiriakou, who was the first to blow the whistle on Washington's torture program, later revealing the name of an alleged torturer at Guantanamo Bay. He was convicted on a law which hasn't been used for 27 years. Earlier this week, Kiriakou explained why he was driven to speak out.
I've never gained anything for what I've said publicly. In fact, I've lost everything. And I believe I was prosecuted not for what I did, but for who I am. A CIA officer who said torture was wrong and ineffective and went against the grain. I'm not naive. I know that national security and intelligence and counterterrorism is a very tough arena. I knew that there was a risk to what I was doing. But I also know that debasing another person and serializing human rights abuses under legal paper is not the American way, and it's not something that as Americans we should be engaged in. We are not a lowest common denominator country measuring what is right by what others do, and the American way stands for something, and it is not torture. I never tortured anybody, but I'm heading to prison while the torturers and the lawyers who papered over it, and the people who deceived it, and the man who destroyed the proof of it, the tapes, will never face justice.
Well, the 30-month sentence that's been talked about as part of John Kiriakou's plea deal, but the judge could still refuse to settle that, meaning that there could potentially be more jail time. Let's get details on this now and speak to Ray Mcgovern, a former CIA officer now joining us here live on RT. A pleasure to see you today, sir. The man we're talking about says he's being punished not for what he did, but for who he is. What are your thoughts here on this?
Well, it's mostly for what he said. He's being punished out of rank hypocrisy. Look at the chronology here. In 2007, John Kiriakou came out very loudly against torture as being not worthy of the United States and not efficient, not a way to get information. Less than a year later, two lawyers confirmed that. One's name was Obama, the other's name was Holder. Obama having become president, Eric Holder, another lawyer, having become Attorney General. They said waterboarding is torture. Torture is illegal. What happened? Well, nothing happened to the torturers. What is happening here is to the person who happened to agree with Holder and Obama and disagree with the previous President Bush. What did Bush say? Well, at his exit interview with Matt Lauer, he said, well, yeah, I'm proud to have authorized that because the lawyer told me it was legal.
So, Mr. Mcgovern, are we talking about basically that it's the bearer of bad news that's used as a scapegoat here? Because ultimately, as we all know, post 9/11, security has been paramount for America. I suppose some might argue, can it indeed afford to let former agents run loose with secrets?
Well, the instructions were to get people to confess. Confess to what? Confess to the existence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Confess to the existence of operational ties between Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein. It was all a crock. They had to make this stuff up, and you can't get reliable information from torture, but you know what? Torture works beautifully if you want unreliable information. And so they conjured up not only ties, not only weapons of mass destruction, but ties between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. And when we invaded that is the UK, and the US invaded Iraq, 69% of the people in the United States believed that there were operational ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq, and that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. It was a masterful propaganda performance on the part of the United States and on the part of the UK. Now, how did they do that? Well, one of the ways was they tortured this one prisoner, Al-Libi, sent him to Egypt, where, guess what? He confessed that he sent people from Al-Qaeda up to Saddam Hussein's Iraq to receive instruction in explosives.
Well, Ray, it's all rather murky. Certainly there have been some people in the past that have said that invading Iraq for 9/11 is like invading Mexico for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. John Kiriakou, though, the man we're talking about here, he essentially, when he comes out with this information about waterboarding and so on and so forth, I suppose I should ask you, where's the line between whistleblowing and that of leaking sensitive information? It certainly seems a bit blurry.
Well, Kiriakou did not leak any sensitive information. George Bush did. So did Eric Holder, and so did Obama. Waterboarding is torture. Torture is in violation of all manner of international agreements. So Kiriakou's crime was sticking with the notion that torture was illegal, and he is accused, I suppose, of having identified or leaked to the press a person who was involved in torture. Now, that person's name was already in the press. He lives in Northern Virginia, where I live. I'd like to knock on his door and say, do you think it's fair for you to have supervised the torture program? And John Kiriakou, who is against torture, going to jail? I'd really like to do that. As a matter of fact, I may do that when I get home. I'm in London right now.
Well, this has all the makings of a Hollywood movie, or certainly a conversation that requires more time than we have available for us here on RT. I do apologise for that. Ray Mcgovern, a former CIA officer, thanks so much. A great pleasure to have you on today.